And God spoke all these words. I'm the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourselves an image in the form of anything in heaven above, or on earth beneath, or in the waters below. You shall not bow down to them and worship them. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing the children for the sins of their parents to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me, but showing love to 1,000 generations of those who love me and keep my commandments. You shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God, for the Lord will not hold anyone guiltless who misuses his name. Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work. Neither you, nor your sons and daughters, nor your male or female servants, nor your animals, nor any foreigner residing in your towns. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and all that is in them, but he rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. Honor your father and your mother, so that you may live long in the land the Lord your God is giving you. You guys paying attention? My kids are here. Honor your father and mother. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not give false testimony against your neighbor. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or his male or female servant, or his ox or donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor. These are the words of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. So much here. You've probably heard of the Ten Commandments. You've probably heard them argued about in public school. There are so many good sermons and so many ways that we could take this. Two things I'll point out just before we dive into the sermon on rest. The first is that there's not a Hebrew word for the word commands, so the idea that these are called the Ten Commandments is sort of ridiculous. The word is actually words. These are the 10 words. They're the 10 words that God gives to Moses to give to the people. The 10 words. So I just want you to know that we're here saying that rest is a command, and these are the 10 commandments. These are the 10 words. They are mandates, right? They are God telling the people to do these things, but not in the sense that we've sort of translated into English. The second thing is, this is my favorite. This is so simple, but and I can't remember who this is. Some commentator says that the last one being, you shall not covet. He says if you live the first 9, you won't want anyone else's life. And I just think that's so good. Oh, I love it. So, rest is a command. Slavery, you've seen this theme already many times in our worship. We've talked about this in relation to confession and everything else. Slavery is a sin composed of uncountable evils. One of those evils is work without rest. We could say the absence of rest is evil. And so if God is a good God, then of course God commands rest. God has to want what is good for us. You came from slavery. This is the story God tells more than any other story throughout the Hebrew Bible. Remember, I'm the Lord your God. I brought you out of slavery. So you came from slavery. You came from work without rest. Don't forget, right? One of the 10 commandments is keep the Sabbath so you don't forget. You must rest. And if you're anything like me, you're like, yeah, God, of course, God, I'm going to rest. I'm a good boy. I'm definitely going to catch up on all the rest and more. I'm going to watch all the movies I've been avoiding. I'm going to eat all the stuff I haven't eaten on my diet. I'm going to stress less about deadlines for a few days, spend more time with the kids, unrestricted, go on date nights with Joe where I don't have to pick my phone up. What? Oh, when am I going to do all this, God? When I'm done with all the work. Of course, that's the plan. So a command without a practice isn't so helpful. So really what we're wondering in this season of rest is, what does a practice of rest look and feel like? Rhythms are inevitable. They're woven into the fabric of the universe. The universe is always working, and woven into that working is rest, right? The universe is always expanding in complexity, depth, and unity, or we might say theologically, God is drawing all things to God's self into a divine oneness in Christ, the universe and God always working. And within that work, undeniably, unquestionably, essential are rhythms of rest. Or we might say these are universal practices of work and rest, universal rhythms of work and rest. And the good news is our body, without you having to decide this or check a box on the entry form, our body's already naturally participating in the great rhythm, whatever you want to call that. The hypothalamus is this thing it's right there in the middle. In this region of the brain, it regulates our autonomic nervous system, the things that we do without thinking about it. And it controls things in our body you don't have to be conscious of. You can be sitting in a movie theater, for example, and breathing without thinking about it. It releases hormones that produce a cascade of interactions in our person. They cause us to wake up. They provoke the appetite that said, I want a croissant on the way. I want a coffee. It controls our emotional activity, right? It was tough getting out of the driveway. What did Joe say? I think the kids are tired, right? It controls our emotional activity. It regulates body temperature. June's tired. She's in the back of the car going, I wish I had a blanket. It alerts us to threats. I mean, it's kind of a big deal, this hypothalamus. This life maker, like all things universal, it operates on a rhythm. Scientifically, this is known as our circadian rhythm. This rhythm has been developed over billions of years. It's at work in us. It's written into the code of our DNA. It's been genetically identified in fruit flies and fungi and iguanas and irises and humans and hedgehogs. It is the rhythm of the natural world. It's the great rhythm. It's how things are. And this makes sense because research shows us that the daily light and dark cycle, research scientists say this, the daily light and dark cycle are the most pervasive and potent and training, right? They train us, the most pervasive and potent and training stimulus of circadian rhythm in mammals. How convenient is that, right? For us, we didn't even need the iPhone. Everything from waking up to eating to emotional well-being is facilitated just by the sun coming up and going down. Which, as we look at our lives and our culture and the prevalence of unhappiness and suicidality and isolation, maybe that's why things like non-routine and staying up too late and disarray in our schedules can have such serious health impacts, right? Not just social impacts, but health impacts. And it might comfort us to know, right, that the autonomic is busy at work, that billions of years of DNA are keeping us in rhythm to some extent. But if you're like me, you might go, but wait, if that's already happening, maybe we can consciously practice it. Maybe we can more intentionally fall into those rhythms and participate with them. There's this need to feel consciously safe to rest. How many of you can relate to that? If you're in that fight or flight and someone's like, relax, just chill, just sit down, it'll be okay. And you're like, yeah, this adrenaline will go away maybe in an hour. You can't, thanks for commanding me to rest. I can't just do that. We need to feel safe. And our animal brain is not very good at feeling safe, right? The reason we're all here after 14 billion years is because we survived. And that's because our animal brain was pretty good at predicting threats. We made it. Congratulations. Our senses are always scanning and assessing for threat, including the other people in this room who might not believe what we do, right? And they might be socially different than we do. They might have different politics than we do. We're always scanning for these threats, right? Our vagus nerve is always stimulated to perceive threat. If it was a muscle, it would constantly be contracted, right? It's always looking for that threat. Removal of that threat is not the same thing as safety, right? But the body needs cues to activate that safety. And so here it is. Here's the practice. You ready for this? All of that, the whole sermon leading up to this. The same science that found out all that cool stuff about the hypothalamus and threat response. Gratitude is a cue to safety which lowers our defenses. Period. Gratitude is a cue to safety that lowers our defenses. And if you don't feel safe enough to rest, the starting point is to get safe. And the starting point to get safe is to look around and remember what you have. Remember how safe you are in the provision of what you've already been given, the people that are around you to support you. The ancient practices of vagal regulation go way before Jesus and Christianity, right? These ancient practices of prayer, of chanting, they create what's called a ventrivagal state. People would get together and do these practices, and they'd feel safe. They'd do what we just did. They'd make confession to each other, right? I want to be this kind of person, but I can't do it all the time. They do that when they feel safe. So by stopping and cultivating an appreciation, we can actually silence the threat stimuli. We can come together and feel safe. And again, this can be even more powerfully stimulated in person with another, face-to-face, in a community. And essentially, this is the command to rest. God doesn't give Israel any individual commands, right? God doesn't tell these 10 things to Moses and go, do with them what you want. He says, take these to the people. God commands the people, what I'll call theologically the holy y'all, right? God doesn't say things to individuals, but to the people. It's a command for God's people to rest. And like we said, rest is a practice, and so God commands us to practice rest together. That's what this series is encouraging. And we have to start by disarming, again, this word where we started, this word command. Right? Who can relax on command? Relax. Rest. Why are you crying? What if we understood commandments as statements about ultimate reality rather than threats, right? Rather than hearing this as a command like, you better rest or else I'm going to punish you in hell. Like, really? How does that add up? But instead, God's saying the rhythms of work and rest, that's how things are, right? Like God gives the word on how it is, and how it is a bit of work and some rest. And you gotta have the rest part. Not just vaguely like, be thankful, right? Or take a smoke break every few hours. God says, remember the Sabbath and keep it set apart. Work in this rhythm, 6 in 1, 7-day rhythm. That works for many folks. I get it. We're not gonna be crazy with this, right? We're not gonna get religious about it. I have friends who are firefighters, right? And first responders, they work 40-hour shifts. Okay, so they don't do Sabbath the same way. Make it work. To move this from an obligation, a command, to the grace of an invitation. Jesus says it like this: come to me, all you who are weary and heavy burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you, and the yoke was like his teaching, his interpretations of the Torah, of the law. Take my interpretation of the Torah upon you and learn from me. Right? He's translating the whole of the Torah, and he says to his disciples, I'm gentle and humble. My yoke, my interpretation of how things are, is gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke, my way, my translation, my interpretation of how this thing is, my yoke is easy, and my burden is light. There's a whole other sermon here, but there's another part where Jesus is like thrashing the Pharisees. And he says, you brood of vipers, you tie up heavy loads and put them on people's backs, but you don't lift a finger to help them carry them. Right? And here Jesus is saying, my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Right? Religion shouldn't be adding to the weight. It should be liberating. And so the closing question is this, as we think about rest this week and our practice of rest: how do we come to Jesus? Right? That's like church 101. But Jesus says, come to me. And I love that he assumes, right? He doesn't say, if something goes horribly wrong and you find yourself weary and heavy burdened, you've done something wrong, turn around and go back. He assumes it. He assumes it. When? Right? Come to me, all of you. He doesn't say some of you. Come to me, all of you who are weary and heavy burdened. It's assumed you're going to be. How do we come to Jesus for that rest? For me, primarily daily, it's breath and stretching. A good cup of coffee. If I can play some music, I get there quicker. Surfing, definitely gratitude. I'll catch myself just being really grateful during the day, saying things my more cynical self would never say out loud. Joy with Joe and the kids and my parents. How do we come to Jesus? And we're not going to prescribe it. I'm asking you because you're the one who best knows. How do you come to Jesus? Is it silence? Is it prayer? Is it service? Is it feast? Is it communion? Is it community? Is it lunch after church? How will we practice rest this week? How will we come to Jesus? How will we open to the rest that we desire that only does come from God? And when we say it comes from God, what we mean again is it comes from the reality of what is, from sinking into the great rhythm. Amen.